So welcome everybody. Thank you again for another day joining me with art class. Today we're going to do a snow globe. This art class, if this is your first time on, is not about perfection, not about having all of your colors or angles right. Sometimes just exploring and trying something new is of benefit, just to give you a different perspective on the world, your world, where you are today. So again, thank you for joining. Those that have been coming for a while, those seasoned artists, and for those that are brand new, welcome. If you haven't received the email from me with the instructions in it, you can email me and I'll add you to the list. So that address is wildc188@gmail.com. That's WILDC, the letter C, 188@gmail.com. And I'll add you. And I send that out. I try to send it out every Saturday, so it gives you time to make a drawing or copy or whatever you need to do to be ready for class, or get your colors ready, or prepare your backer board, take your canvas. And it just is paper that we use, 9 by 12. So it's not a full-size sheet, just a half. I am honored that you've come on and that you've been doing this. We're coming up to at the ending of another year. Well, it's December. So next week will be our last class before January. So I'm going to take a 2-week holiday break. And I think that lots of people travel and do things. So we'll just have the 2 weeks in between. So December the 27th, we won't be painting. And January the 3rd, we won't be painting, but we'll be back on the Tuesday, January the 10th. So, but we are here next Tuesday, so I'm not sure what our project's going to be yet. I'm working on some things, so I'll let you know on Saturday. As long as you're on the list and you send me the request, then you'll get what you need for colors and for your artwork. So again, today we're going to do a snow globe. This is a step-by-step. We'll just go one piece at a time. I move from one area of the canvas to another just to let pieces dry while we're in between. And with that, I'll just let you know we will need to have 2 containers of water. So I just have 2 buckets of water. One is clear, one is for rinsing brushes, one is for just putting fresh water on. We're not going to soak our canvas with this picture. You will need your paints and brushes. In the instructions, I say anywhere from a 0 to a 6. Now I do have a 9 today. It's a little bit thicker. So if you got a bigger brush, it'll hold a little more paint for the bottom part of our picture, just for a bit of a wash on there. And I've also got 3s, a 2, a 3, and a 5. So they're just a pointed brush. I have bought dollar store brushes before. Some of them fall apart. If your brush starts to fall apart or the bristles start to come out, maybe it's time to get a new brush. It's frustrating when that happens, and it's no fun when you're frustrated when you're trying to paint something. So with that, we'll just get into art mode. So I just like to take 3 deep breaths, and if you want to do that with me, I would appreciate that. So find something in the room that gives you joy. Just have a quick look around. What makes you smile? Maybe you've got a pretty picture. Maybe you've got some artwork. Maybe you've got, I don't know, something that just makes you feel good. So we'll take a deep breath in. We're going to hold that breath at the top just momentarily for a second or two. And then when we release, we'll drop our shoulders right down. A lot of tension happens in here. I don't know if shopping, carrying bags, if that's what you're doing these days. So we'll do that 3 times, and then we'll get into some fun stuff with our art. So we'll just give yourself the gift of time and focus for this time that we have together. So deep breath in. And hold it at the top. Find something you love or like or makes you smile, and release. Really drop those shoulders down. Second deep breath in and hold it and release. Give yourself that smile, feels good inside. And a third deep breath in. And hold it for a second. And smile, lots to do, and release. And just give yourself a little warm massage. And with that, we've got our card drawn. So at halftime, I'll read that card, and that applies for everyone in the class today. And I'll turn our camera and we'll get into some fun stuff. So we're on to the snow globe. There we go. So I'm starting just like you, just with a picture drawn and a blank canvas. And Troy is inviting, if you want to, just say hi, where you're from. We don't always know where everybody's from, but there's lots of different places. So we're going to start with a raw umber, which is a brown color. So if you don't have the exact names of the paints that we're going to use, that's okay. We're just starting with the brown. So, and I also have some paper towel that I like to keep on hand. So I tap my brushes off. I wipe the colors off when I change to a new color. Sometimes if I have too much color on, I can just tap that off. Paper towel is a great absorbent. So when I don't actually use a whole sheet, I just use a small portion of a sheet. So starting with raw umber, and I've watered it down quite a bit. I'm going to start and I'm going to do the log that's holding, painting the log that is holding the globe. So I'm just putting this umber, just watered down. It is a log, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And it can have lights and darks. If all of your colors aren't exact all the way through, not to worry. We're going to be putting some lines in and around just to give it more of the look of a log. So we're leaving that rounded spot up above because we're going to make that really dark, because that's our shadowed part that our globe is sitting on. So I'll just fill that in. So just go ahead and fill that in. So you can see that I'm really not worried to be too exact about all of my colors, because I know I'm going to be putting lines up and down throughout to give it more of the look of a wood grain. So as I said, we're not soaking our canvas. We're doing wet on dry. So this is wet paint on a dry surface. And it's just a step-by-step. So if I'm going too fast, if you need me to slow down a little bit, I can do that. So just open your mic and just ask me. So if you're just popping on now, if you've missed the beginning, all we've done with our snow globe is we're just painting the base with raw umber. So fairly watered down. It's not really dark. So just painting that base, just in raw umber. You can see I've got lights and darks, not too worried about perfection. This is a log. So we are going to put some marks to show that it is a wood grain. So we're just doing our base coat at this point. It will get darker. And at halftime, I'll read that card. I know some of you are still painting. I can see that. So we'll just give a moment for you to catch up before we move on to another part of the canvas. So I like to move from one section to another, allowing for different areas to dry. Then we're not having colors run into other colors and getting frustrated. So this is just wet on dry. We're not wetting the whole canvas. So it's just the base coat we're putting on now. We're not worrying too much about texture for the log. We're not worrying about that base up above either, because if we put that dark on now, the lighter color that we put on the ridge, if we put dark on now here in this spot, it will bleed into the bottom part. And we don't want that to happen. We do want to have lines here, but we want to have a little bit of control. So we'll let that dry first. And in order for that to dry, we're going to move to a completely different area on the canvas. We're going back, or we're going up into the snow globe. And the color that I chose for the house is blue. If you want to choose red, you're welcome to choose that. If you want to make it a terracotta color, that's entirely up to you. I've chosen blue, and I've chosen cobalt blue. So cobalt blue is kind of a sky blue, not so much an ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is a little more gray. I wanted a lighter blue. So I've chosen cobalt. So I'm going into my cobalt blue. I'm using a smaller brush because it is a smaller area. So cobalt blue. And I'm using it fairly dark. I'm not trying to lighten it too much. So I'm going to, I've drawn some little lines just around the edge, and I'm just going to outline those lines. And I'm going to leave below that and above that white. So I can do my outer edge. So this is my roof. And the reason that I've left that without any color is it's showing that there's a bit of snow on there. So I'm putting that blue, just leaving above and below it, just white. It's perfectly normal in a watercolor to leave white on your canvas. If we were doing acrylic painting, we would be adding white. So watercolor dries 20 to 30% lighter from when you put it on. Oops, I think I've done the wrong spot on my canvas. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it the way it is. I've got the blue showing on my roof. Actually, that should be white. But I'm going to go with it. I'm going to leave it the way it is. I'm going to come down, do my sides of my house. I'm going to paint around the windows. I'm going to paint my window frames blue inside the windows. So this is going to look different than the initial, but that's okay. So I'm leaving my window, inside my windows clear. Around my window again, do my pane. And I can do all my windows that way. I will avoid that area when I paint. So I'm going to leave the little spot on top of my roof at the very top, my little peak. I'm going to leave that white to look like snow. Go around my door. So I'm also leaving my door white. That way my wreath will really show up. And that's my snowman's hat, which is going to be black. Or if you want, you can make yours red at the time. And right now, we're just going to continue painting the rest of the house. And still using that color cobalt. Now it's going to dry 20 to 30% lighter than when we put it on. So we will be able to do some nice outlines in the same color. But because our first color is going to dry, when we put on our second color, it will look darker than, even though it's exactly the same color. So on my snow globe on my house, you can see that there's pencil lines. And when we come back, those pencil lines are going to be a darker blue to give a nice outline. So we'll just leave that. Once you've got that painted, we'll leave it and let it dry completely before we do any more on your house. So if you've outlined your windows and you put your little, the little panes inside your window, perfect. And maybe you have your center of your roof white, where mine I painted blue, and that's okay. So maybe yours is white, perfect, if you followed the example rather than what I did. But either way, it's going to be pretty nice looking snow globe, so not to worry. Now there's also a green wreath on the door. So hopefully you were able to see that and draw that in. So in that white section where that wreath is, I'm just going inside. So I'm not touching any blue, and I'm just doing a nice dark green wreath. So it's just a little circle just for a wreath on the door. We'll come back and do that red accent on that as well. I'm going to move from the house and the wreath back down to this rim, which is our shadow on top of our log. So I just want this shadow, only that partial ring. And I'm using the same raw umber that I put on before, but I'm using more paint than water. So it's going to be, if you see that I'm putting that on, it's quite deep in color. So the bottom part should be dried by now. And so then I can do my shadow underneath. And I'm doing that again in raw umber, full paint, not so much water. So it's quite deep in color. So I'm just following that line, the lines that I've drawn. And sometimes when I'm painting, I'll take my whole canvas and turn the whole thing upside down or sideways so that I can get at the colors or get at my line more easily. Because I'm on an easel, I'm working a little bit backwards right now. I paint into the camera, so I'm working a little bit of a backwards view. And trying not to touch any wet spots on my canvas. So lots of times I'm wiping paint off myself at the same time. I'm just filling that in. So that globe is just sitting on that log. So as I said, sometimes I turn my canvas sideways just to get into a different angle. Sometimes I turn it upside down completely, then I'm not touching wet paint. So whatever works for you to be able to get in those crevices and paint those angles, go ahead and move that around. Only because mine's on an easel, for the most part, I try to keep it upright. If I want paint to move, then if I'm putting a lot of water and I want that paint to move around, then I really like to turn it upside down and sideways. I'm still working with my smaller brush, my number 3. I switched from the larger one. We're still going to allow this log to dry a little bit more, and especially now we've done that shadow, we want to let that dry before we do any further work down below. So I'm going to move upward with my hooker's green, the same color that I put on the wreath on the door. I'm going to paint the tree, this evergreen tree, at the side and the back of the house. So I'm not looking for full coverage. I actually want a fair bit of white to still be showing in between. So I'm just doing some strokes, just some markings. I'll do the outer edge and fill it in, the outer edge of my green. But in between, I'm not filling in every spot. As a matter of fact, I want lots of white showing that will look like there's snow on the boughs of the tree. So you can see I'm just touching my brush and then lifting it off. And you can have a few little spots that have a little extra green if you like, but leave lots of white that will look like it's really a snowy day. So while you're filling in your tree, putting those green touches on, still leaving white. We're just about at half time, believe it or not. Isn't it funny how fast that time goes? So our card today for everyone on class says, I breathe calmly and easily. And I hope you are. And if you're not, take a deep breath in and let it out and drop those shoulders down again. I am safe in this moment. So I breathe calmly and easily. I am safe in this moment. So if at any point you get stressed a little bit, just take a deep breath, just let it go. And that just doesn't have to be art class, that can be anywhere. And just a reminder, while we're doing this project, this is just a piece of paper. Sometimes a piece of paper just wants to be a piece of paper. So if this particular piece of paper doesn't turn out exactly as you like, you do have access to watch the video again and you can try it one more time. So, or as many times as you like. And you can paint the house different colors if you like, and try and see what works best for you visibly. What do you like the best? And as I mentioned, I like to go from spot to spot, letting things dry so that I'm not conflicting or working, trying to figure out other colors or trying to fix something that I ran into a color that I didn't want to be running into. So the next color that we have that we're going to put on is a burnt sienna. So it's a red and brown, sort of a terracotta mix. If you don't have that color, if you mix a little bit of red with your brown, you'll come up with that color. Just looking to see if I have a piece of paper, I can demonstrate that. Color we're looking for is raw umber, or sorry, raw sienna, which is sort of a red color like terracotta pots. So if you work with your brown color and you add a little bit of red to your brown color, you'll come up to something similar. So that's just a little bit of red mixed in with the brown, and you'll come up with something pretty similar. So I'm working with that raw sienna, and I'm watering it down, and I'm just going to put that on top of my base. So it's watered down, and I'm not trying to get full coverage everywhere. I want some streaks in my log. So I'm just going the same direction as the lines that were drawn there, and I'm leaving some spaces in between. So watercolor is color on top of color on top of color. Sometimes will give you a really nice deep effect. It'll give you that 3D look. So that's all we're looking for, is just a little bit of color, not too perfect in the brush strokes, doesn't really matter. We're still going to come back and do some more work with that. But that's the only time that we will use that color, is just to do those little strokes in our log. We just want a little bit of red in there. And as I said, I like to move from one section to another. So I'm going to completely let this dry, and I'm moving upward with my brown, and I'm going to paint these trees. So they're drawn in. They don't have to be perfect. If you've got lines that you've already drawn in, just go over the lines. If you want to add a few branches, that's okay. If in spots it's lighter or darker, that's okay too, because that's what trees do. Some spots are lighter, some are darker. And it's going to go right along the side of the house. So we're not leaving a gap in between. We're going to come, because we want the look that it's gone right down behind the house. It's growing, and the house is just in front. And if you want to add extra branches, this is your snow globe, so please go ahead. And while I have that brown on my brush, I'm just going to lighten it with a little bit of water, and I'm going to come underneath my tree, right to the edge, right along the bottom edge of the house. Right along the front, just missing my snowman. I still want my snowman to be white, so I'm leaving it, just kind of leaving it alone. And I'm just looking for sort of a watery brown look. I'm going to keep working with this brown. So now that I've got this brown on my brush, now I can start to put a few lines in my wood on my log. So I'm doing a little bit of fresh paint and pulling from that and doing a little bit of dry brushing. So dry brushing means once I run out of paint on my brush, I'm going to keep using my brush, and some of that paint is, you're going to be able to hear it actually. So I'm going to work along all of the lines that are there. And if some of it, as that just happened, I'll just do that again. If I go on this line, and you can see it's starting to run a little bit, that's perfect. So let some of that just run. You can pull some of it aside if you like, but just let it flow a little bit. So some of your raw sienna on there might still be a little bit damp. So that will help with this movement of this addition of fresh paint. And some can be lighter and darker. It is a wood log, so it's going to be different in places. And I'm just going to run a little bit of that fresh paint along the bottom, just pull it up a little bit from the bottom. Then I've got a finished edge. I'm just running that a little bit along the bottom and then pulling that up into my wood, up to the rest of the log. And I do want where it starts at my shadow at the top of the log, I do want that to join, so I don't want a big gap in between. So if it's lighter in some spots, I want to add just a little bit of color. And remember, take a deep breath and drop your shoulders. It's just a piece of paper with fresh, darker paint. I'm going to make the look of just a little knot hole here and there. Not to overdo it, but I got a few knot holes I just want to put in my wood. So just kind of a round with a little mark comes up and down. If you make it too dark, you can add a bit of water and just shade it out. Just move it around. So it goes on fairly dark. I rinse my brush, I just add a little bit of water, and then I just move that a little bit and leave some of that dark. Now there's a little snowman just sitting in front of the house. He's just a really tiny snowman. So with your smallest brush, if you have a 0 brush, that would work. If you have a 1 or a 2, that would work. So I'm going to give this snowman with the same brown I've been working with. I'm going to give this snowman some arms. So he's just a tiny guy or girl. Just going to give it some arms. So that's full strength brown or raw umber. So there's a little bit of detail on that snowman. So that snowman does have a face. He has some buttons. But before we do any more on the snowman, we'll let those arms dry. Hopefully you've got those arms on there. Or if not, you can put your arms near the end. But I'm going back into my cobalt. So with my small brush into my cobalt blue. And I'm going to put the outline of the roof lines on my house in cobalt blue. I'm going to go around that door in a nice dark color. Really shows up. So I'm not going to go down the bottom. I'm just going to leave the brown to stand for itself. A bit of a shadow on the outside edge. And I'll redo around those windows. A nice deep frame. Our snow globes coming together. And I've got a little tiny red dot just on the top of my wreath on my door. So it's only two little tiny red dots. And because they came together, they look like a bow. And sticking with that cobalt blue on my smallest brush, just with the tip of my brush, just to be sure when I'm using a color and I'm using my brush, and I want to be sure that the paint is on the tip, I'm rolling my brush. So I'm using my hand and rolling my brush just so the paint is only on the tip. And with the paint on the tip of my brush, I'm going to put a little outline around the creases in my snowman. And then to make it look like my snowman is in a puddle of snow or it is melting a little bit, I'm just going to put a little bit of blue underneath the body, just at the bottom. So it's just underneath the bottom of the snowman. He's got his arms, he's got a little bit of blue around each section. And a little tiny spot for a nose. I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow and a little bit of red. If you have orange already in your palette, perfect. If you don't have anything that's like an orange, if you mix a little bit of yellow and red, you'll come up with orange. And I'm going to give my snowman the tiniest of noses. Well, it's really tiny. It's just a little line for a nose. So we don't usually get into too small of detail, but this is on a snow globe. There are some pieces that are really quite detailed. If you don't want to do this with your snowman, just leave it a snowman, that's fine. And then while we're still working with the snowman, this is the color black or Payne's gray, it doesn't matter. So I have black on my brush and I'm twirling my brush because I only want a little bit of paint on the tip of my brush. And I'm just going to paint two little eyes on my snowman. They're really tiny. And I'm going to give him 3 little buttons. So they're really tiny. Just has eyes, 3 little buttons, and a little swipe underneath that nose, not touching the nose, just underneath the nose, just for a mouth. Just give him a little smile. And while I have that black, we're just going to give the snowman a hat. And final touch on this snowman, I've got a little bit of red. So just below the mouth, just before the belly starts. I'm just going to give a little scarf. That's just a swipe of a brush, just a little scarf. And I've just used red. If you want to use a different color, that's fine. That's whatever color works for you. This is your snow globe. So not to get too caught up in the details, but that's as detailed as we're going to get at this point. And I want to let that dry. So we're back again now to cobalt blue. And I want a very light cobalt blue. So if I take my regular cobalt blue, which is fairly dark, I'm going to add water. So I want it fairly light, almost invisible. And with that color, I'm going to go around the outside of my globe. So I have my pencil line there. So I'm going to follow my pencil line all the way around. All the way down to the other side. So we want to be able to see it, but we want it fairly light. And then I'm moving to my larger brush, my largest brush with my cobalt blue in it. So my cobalt blue, not completely dark, but I do want it to be, it's not full on cobalt blue. This would be full on, quite dark. So I want it to be lighter, a little bit lighter, adding some water. So just add a little bit of water. And I'm going to create the look of a snowy day in my globe. So I'm not looking for too much of a dripping look. So if it gets too damp, then just tap it off with paper towel or pick up that excess color. But I'm looking for white left in my sky. So I don't want to go on every spot. I want to leave white. But I'm filling in my sky with cobalt blue. don't be afraid to leave white. And if some of your spots seem a little bit darker, go ahead and use your paper towel and just tap that off. Breathe while you're doing this. I know it's a lot of work you've done so far. And if you're worried, oh, what if I wreck it? No, just leave a little bit of white and it will be fine. Then we want to continue down at the bottom, still making the look of snow or a snow at the bottom. So I'm just putting some markings, just using my brush. You see, I'm just touching and lifting off. It looks like snow. And then so that I have a little bit of ground in there, I'm just going to add a little bit of brown here and there. Just it looks a little bit like there's some earth in there. Lastly, a little bit of bushes at the side. There we go.
Each other, have like a minute and a bit each, just to say what your motivation are.
Yep, I'm sort of hearing someone. Is someone giving me a message?
No, they just unmuted. I've got them.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Troy. And lastly is to decide where you want your artist signature to be and what you want that to look like. So you can decide, do you want that to be in the house or do you want that to be on the log, or do you want, where do you want that to be is up to you. I'm just touching up a little bit where I had just a little bit of running. There we go. And I think I'm going to put mine right here on the snow globe. And we're right at the top of the hour. So there you go. That's what you can do in 1 hour. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. And if you decide to change the color of your house and do a second one, that would be beautiful. That's entirely up to you. I welcome that.